these two entities were at the center of the housing bubble, the center of the economic downturn. And for years, what we saw in terms of the way in which they were run was privatized profits in the form of extravagant bonuses to executives and dividends to shareholders with the expectation of socialized losses. And one of the reasons I think it is particularly egregious that we've yet to really have the corporate culture at the GSEs recognize the role that sort of these incentive compensation packages played was because one of the problems driving this was that when you did try to run legislation that would rein in the systemic risk at these two entities, when you tried to bring down the over leverage, which was 100 to 1, in terms of what they were holding in their portfolio, in terms of the arbitrage that they were engaged in, the reason the shareholders and the reason the executives at Fannie and Freddie resisted it was because that over leverage worked for them. And the downside risk, of course, went to the taxpayer. But the upside of utilizing that leverage was in their compensation packages. So it appears that in terms of that habit on compensation, that has not changed. And despite the fact that the government took these companies over, and despite the fact that, frankly, taxpayers have flooded these institutions with tax dollars, they continue to bleed cash. And I guess that's the other part that really strikes me. We're talking about compensation at a time when we read last week that Freddie Mac reported $4.4 billion in losses and requested another $6 billion from the Treasury. You know, think this through for a minute. When you think about the fact that the people, the working people out there who are propping up Fannie and Freddie in the housing market, they're losing time on the clock right now. Reductions in pay for them is part of the status quo, right? I mean, layoffs are far too common for the taxpayers that are shouldering this. And I think these bonuses just represent a failed grasp of reality on the part of the institutions. And it's not just the reaction from the public. You have the FHFA's Inspector General. And this is what he has to say about the practice. He says, FHFA has a responsibility to the taxpayer to efficiently, consistently, and reliably ensure the compensations paid to Fannie and Freddie executives are reasonable. They're concerned about it. The IG says FHFA lacks key controls necessary to monitor the enterprise's ongoing executive compensation decisions under the approved packages. Well, that's why we're involved here. It's a sad day, I think, when common sense, or whatever we want to call it, must be applied through legislation. But when we're told that ongoing executive compensation decisions under these approved packages can't be controlled by FHFA, then I think we've got to step in. Now, I think DeMarco has done a good job in general in a bad situation over there, but this would appear to be the exception to the rule. And this bill, of which I'm a co-sponsor, the Equity in Government Compensation Act, will immediately suspend the compensation packages for these executives. And given that these institutions are effectively government entities, that's what we're talking about here, they should be treated as government entities. And I commend the chairman for bringing this bill up for consideration. I think this is the approach we need to take once something becomes a de facto extension of a government entity, and it's eaten up $4.4 billion in losses here in its last report, and it's requesting $6 billion from the Treasury before us, and here we look at these compensation packages.